国外的民众很多对中国的理解是有点偏见的，这个主要原因是媒体的这种就宣传包括报道是偏离了事实。那我们来看一下真正了解中国的一些外国人是怎么看待这个问题的，告诉民众真实的中国是什么样子的。
If you look at China from the American lens, it will never make sense
Yeah,
to you.
exactly.
Much like if you look at America from the Chinese lens, it doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense.
And so that's you only will understand it if you really live here and understand it and feel it. And the simplest example I can say is, in my community in America, very Republican, all love the Second Amendment, all have guns. And they've said, it's like, Cyrus, like, did you ever feel unsafe being in China? Like, I know that government doesn't like to have guns. And I'm like, actually, it's the complete opposite, because there is no guns. I feel extremely safe.
But that's such a wild way to look at it, right?
But that's such a typical American way. Like, if that's a very hardcore Republican way to look at it, because in their
This is so wild to me. Like,
it's wild.
You would feel less safe by having no guns.
It's wild because you've been in China a long time, right? I'm trying to put you into a, born and raised in Las Vegas, Republican, loves his guns, and so that their mindset is like guns equal freedom, guns equal, hey, I get to control, like the government fears me because, because we're armed, right? That's why we have the Second Amendment. So again, if you tell this to a Chinese person, they're like, that makes absolutely zero sense to me. And I'm like, you're right. I can understand your point, but I also understand why he's saying that, because I understand where he's coming from. That's what I mean. You can't look at, you cannot look at China from an American lens. You guys have probably heard of that Harvard study where they did this 10-year study, and they just seemed like go through all of these villages and stuff, and you realize that the Chinese government is actually genuinely popular amongst the majority of Chinese people. And, the caveats to that would be, I think a lot of very ultra wealthy people would not be a big fan of the government, that because, in China, you can't be this very over the top, gao diao, kind of guy. You have to be di diao, right? You got to be di diao.
Because that's where they crack down the hardest.
That's where they crack down the hardest, right? So,
but I think America could use a little bit of that right now, right?
Well, and that's why you see, like, that like people will ask me, another common question I get is, if China is so great, then why do all these people from China with money, why do they come to the United States? I said, it's very simple. If you've got money, there's no better place in the world to live than the United States, especially for Chinese. If you have a lot of money, you can control the system, right? You can take your kids, you can put them into the best schools, you can live in the best neighborhoods, you can do everything you want to do, and you can get a head start on life. And that's not necessarily true in China, because China, we want to take care of the whole society, right? And there was a really interesting case study where in Shenzhen, there was this amazing teacher, like top 10 teacher in China. And basically the government, what happened was there was a boom of real estate around that school, because everyone's like, hey, we need to get our kids in that school so that they can learn from that teacher, because she was so advanced at whatever she was teaching. It became very famous online. So the government's like, whoa. We don't like seeing that people are moving to that area because they're pricing out others. The real estate started to get up. But of course, everybody with money is like, well, no worries, I can pay for it. But then all of a sudden, the people that can't get in there, they can't get access to that teacher. So what did the Chinese government do? They pulled that teacher out, said, you're now going to teach online so that every student in Shenzhen gets access to you, because we want the society to improve. That's a very Chinese thing. And so again, that's an issue. Like if you have money, you don't like that. Because why? Because if I have money, I should be able to pay to get ahead.
Well, because your privileges decrease.
My privileges decrease, right? But it's that common prosperity, right? Yeah. We want everybody. We want the tide to raise all boats, the yachts and the little minnow boats. We want everybody to get up. But so again, you can see the frustration from somebody that's rich, where it's like, I should be able to pay for privilege.
Yeah. Why am I not getting ahead?
Why am I not getting ahead? Whereas we know in the United States, it's like, hey, you want to get to Harvard, write a check.
Money.
You want to live in the most exclusive neighborhood. You want to get to the most exclusive prep school to get you into Harvard. Check. Pay
to play.
Pay to play. And that's how the system works.
But going back to this whole idea of the similarities actually between, let's say, China and U.S. in terms of the people and what they actually want at the end of the day is strikingly similar, right? It's very similar to things that let's say Bernie Sanders would talk about, right? If you look at Bernie Sanders and the kind of support and popularity he has for his ideas, if you look at the new New York City mayoral candidate, Zoran, the things he's talking about,
right,
a lot of things are strikingly like Chinese. Yeah. It's like, well, that's kind of what we're doing here in many ways.
For sure.
But obviously, they're not going to say that over there, nor are they going to think that. But it's this idea that we're actually, at the end of the day, we're all kind of chasing the same things. And what we get caught up on is we quibble about the processes to get.
I found an amazing poll that I think it was from the Pew Research Center, where it said 77% of the world now views China in a negative light. 77%. For that survey, they interviewed 30 countries. Every single country was from the global north. It was essentially the US, Canada, the EU, Australia, and Japan.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, this is not the world. You're not even close to the
Far
world.
forward. They represent a very small percentage of the population of the world.
Very small percentage of the population. So that's where I make the videos where people will say, Cyrus, you know, you're too pro-China. I'm like, no. Listen to this. Is if you have a survey that says 77% of the world and you block out South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East, I mean, that's by far the vast majority of people in this world.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's where, again, like if you take, let's just pick a random country, Bolivia, you know, or any other country, you know, these small, you know, Nigeria, you know, just like, you know, smaller countries. It's like, what do you want? Of course I want to do trade with both the United States and China.
It happens to be the case that China has had a centralized administrative state for 2,245 years, ever since Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi unified the Qin dynasty. There have been a few periods of disintegration of the dynasties, but if you look through the Qin, the Han, the Tang, the Song, the Ming, the Qing, till today, till the PRC, this is the same structure, by the way. This is an administrative state ruling over almost the same region, by the way, for more than 2,000 years. So, by the way, it has been wondrously effective for a long time at keeping the internal peace. China's only wars were nomadic invasions from the steppelands in the north. And then one crazed, then the Mongols invading, that's part of that, and one absolutely crazed shogun in the 1590s trying to take over China, and he made it as far as Korea and was killed. Other than that, this has been actually exceptional statecraft until Britain had the genius idea of fighting a war to sell opium in China in 1839. One of the most noble efforts imaginable. And that started the modern era of China. So I don't buy it at all. But even if it were true, it's illegal under international law, unwise, and, look at the great accomplishment of pouring in, I don't know how many hundreds of billions of dollars into Afghanistan for 20 years to get from the Taliban regime to the Taliban regime. This is American genius at democracy promotion. They don't care at all about democracy, by the way, at all. They topple governments they don't like that won't do their bidding. They topple democracies if they don't like them. They'll topple anybody that they don't like. That's how it's worked all along. They never said, we can't topple Mossadegh in 1953. He's a democratic government. No, they toppled a democratic government in Iran and put in a police state, which led to wonderful long-term relations with Iran because they really love the American people for that. So this is not about democracy. This is a game, and it's a terrible game, and it's a secret game, and it's played by the CIA, which is the most important agency in the United States, because they have complete secrecy, complete unaccountability. There was one review of the CIA 49 years ago, the Church Committee, and nothing since then. And as one of our CIA directors, they're all, I was going to say one of the worst, but they're all the same by the time they get there, or by the time they leave there, because the agency takes them over. Pompeo said, as he was proudly explaining the role of the CIA to some Texas students a few years ago, and you can find it online. He said, what do we teach at the CIA? To lie, cheat, and steal. And that's a pretty good encapsulation of the methodology. And that is a very dangerous world being created that way. So China's not going to turn the U.S. into a dictatorship. Maybe the U.S. will turn into a dictatorship. Maybe it will just turn into a plain old plutocracy. Maybe it will turn into a military-industrial state as the complete dominance. I don't know. But it's not going to come from China. It's going to come from inside. That's where our risk is.